This is the Transforming Anxiety podcast with Kelly Hanlon McCormick, and today is episode number 220, The Chasm Between Knowing and Doing. Welcome to Transforming Anxiety. I'm your host, Kelly McCormick. I'm a mom to 2 boys, a wife, friend, daughter, and sister, and I'm a certified life coach, yoga teacher, and soon-to-be mindfulness meditation teacher. I'm no stranger to anxiety, and I'm here to teach you how to manage your mind and your emotions so that you too can transform anxiety into calm, peace, and whatever you want for your life. I'm so glad you're here. Hey there, welcome in today. All right, so we're going to do something short and sweet today. Although I sometimes say that and it doesn't end up being short. Maybe it's sweet, I don't know. But it's summer. It's kind of a holiday-ish week here in the States. It's like that weird week when when school gets out and summer starts and it just feels like nothing has really fully begun yet. Camps and sports and whatever, but the routine is still all wonky because we just got out of school and everyone's trying to figure out what the heck to do and where to be during the week. So that's what's going on here, which is why I wanted to explore this idea. It's a big idea, but we're going to do it like in a bite-sized way, at least for today. This is one of those kind of just be aware of it things. It's one of those truths to be mindful of because it shows up everywhere. And when you know about it, you can recognize where you're at. You can orient yourself a bit better, which is enormously helpful when you're creating change and undergoing big or small transformations in your life. And what we're talking about is there's a chasm between the knowing and the doing. Here's what I mean. Think about all of the things that we all know, but maybe don't do anyway, right? Like you know you need to eat healthy food and get a good amount of sleep and stay hydrated. You know you'd like to be patient with your kids, right? And on top of things at work. You know you'd like to work out regularly and meditate and maybe learn how to speak a foreign language. You know you should save more money and buy fewer unnecessary things online. You know you'd like to spend less time on social media and more time with family or pursuing activities that you really enjoy. None of this is new information, right? You're not surprised by anything I'm saying here. You probably resonate with most of that, in fact. And yet, I'm guessing you notice there's a decent gap between knowing what you would like to do and what you truly want for yourself in your life and what you actually do on a daily basis, right? There's a chasm between knowing and doing. So I think of all the industries out there making boatloads of money explaining things to us that we already know, right? How to eat, how to work out, when to sleep. None of this is rocket science. And really, I mean, we live in the information age. All of this knowledge is widely available for free, right? We can learn way more about anything today than ever before in the history of humans. But are we doing anything, or much anyway, with the knowledge that we have? Are we acting on what we know? Right? Not so much. So if knowing something meant doing that something, I mean, we'd all pretty much be set, right? Now, get this. There's even a term for this, and I love this. This is called the G.I. Joe fallacy. Okay. This is a term that was coined by Dr. Laurie Santos and Dr. Tamar Gendler. They're both of Yale University. This idea... Okay, well, wait. We have to go back to the 80s and the G.I. Joe cartoon to fully explain this and really appreciate it. Do you remember this show? It was like a 25-minute cartoon that had some story, some moral every episode about doing good things, right? Being the best version of yourself, helping others, learning from your mistakes, you know, just like every other cartoon and a lot of the 80s sitcoms and all. The characters encounter something bad, right? Things go horribly awry. And then there's like the sweet moral and kind of goofball ending to the whole thing. It's all wrapped up in a 25-minute package. And at the end of the show, they did the same little shtick every time. They wrapped up the moral with the same saying. And it went like this: now you know, and knowing is half the battle. Now here's the deal with that. We humans have the idea that knowing is way more than half the battle. That knowing is practically doing. Right? This may explain why we're so obsessed with consuming information. We erroneously think that what we know translates into what we do. But the reality is that knowing is actually far less than half the battle. Knowing barely enters into the doing equation. And there are a few reasons for this. Now, Santos has a few publications out there about this. Like if you Google the G.I. Joe fallacy and find her papers on it, they're pretty heady, but they're kind of fascinating. But here's the Cliff's Notes version. The chasm between knowing and doing, it's filled with a few things. There are a few reasons why the gap between what we know and what we do is so wide. So we're just going to take a look at a few of the biggies today to help us solidify this idea and practice becoming more aware of it so that we can spot it out in the wild, however it's showing up in our lives. So here's what we're going to talk about today. Past experience or habits and routines, that's one. Biases is another. And associations is another. This sums up why we do what we do and don't do what we don't do, even when what we know runs counter to what we want or need or think we should do, right? To what we know. So, first one, past experience. What do you usually do? What have you done before? What's worked for you in the past? And by worked, I mean you're still alive. Our brains have a remarkably low bar here. They are like unashamed about this. Our brains are not looking to optimize our lives. Our brains are looking to survive. So if you're alive, your brain thinks it's doing its job. Meaning whatever you're doing, whatever you've been doing, it's working, like in a survivalist sense. So even if what you know is different than what you're currently doing, there's some evidence that what you're doing is working because you're alive. And that's literally the threshold our brains are using to measure success. Alive? Good. Not alive? Bad. All right? Now, this is clearly, obviously, this is really problematic when we're looking to create change because what we've been doing has been working, according to our brains, simply because we're still alive. So overriding this really crass version of success in the interest of something different, which our brains like to remind us might not work as well as what we've been doing, is kind of tricky. This is a big part of what's in the chasm between what we know and what we do. What we know could be impressive and lengthy and detailed, but to get from knowing that impressive thing to doing that impressive thing means overriding our current MO, right? All that we've been doing and experiencing up till now. And that's a pretty big leap to make intellectually. All right, so another one is our biases. Now, this is interesting to consider. There are things that you cannot see or make sense of differently, even when you know otherwise. So think of things like optical illusions, right? Magic tricks. You know it's an illusion. You know the magician is tricking your brain and your eyes somehow, but you can't force yourself to see it any differently. It's like your brain takes what you see with your eyes and makes sense of it based on a lot of things. Obviously, that's a pretty complicated system. And that is a bias that we humans are basically stuck with. Even when we know Otherwise, we can't see it differently. Okay, another example of bias is how humans tend to view attractive or aesthetically appealing people or things. So if we see an attractive person give a presentation, we're likely to have a more positive experience of it, a more positive feedback on it, right? If we see a cute kitten or a baby do something, even if it's something totally annoying or obnoxious, because a lot of what kittens and babies do is, right? But we tend to judge it with more leniency than something that's not as attractive to us. All right, here's another example of bias. And there are loads of these. I mean, this is just like tip of the iceberg, of course. But another one is loss aversion. Businesses use this all the time to get us to buy things in certain ways. So like one is free shipping. We're paying for shipping whether it's free or not. Like, are you with me? But we like to think it's free. Even if it's baked into the price of whatever we're buying, I think across the board, we all agree. It's like, charge me $5 more for whatever thingy I'm buying from Amazon and then ship it to me for free. I feel way better than if it's $5 cheaper and I have to pay $5 to get it shipped. Across the board, we feel this way. Another example of this is rebates. So if you buy this thing with a $30 rebate, there's this implication that I'm somehow getting my own money back, right? I've avoided losing my own $30 versus if you give people like a $30 bonus, which is just an unexpected surprise $30 that we aren't emotionally attached to. We like to avoid these kinds of losses, right? It's loss aversion. It's a bias that we have. So even though we know about it, this is my point, the chasm, right, between the knowing and the doing. Even though we know about it, even though we're talking about free shipping and rebates, right? Even though we're talking about things being aesthetically pleasing, right? Chances are this week you're going to buy something, you're going to feel pleased that it comes with free shipping, even though you know you're paying for that shipping somehow. It's the perception that you've avoided losing money. It's a bias. And again, this plays into that difference, that gap between what we know and what we do. So you start to see this is pretty wild, right? Okay, last example for now. We can talk about this for a while. This last one, though, is associations. And I feel like this one is particularly timely, and it's becoming more and more apparent in our society all the time. Humans, I don't know if you've noticed, humans make things mean things. So we create associations where there are none. And then we start to accept things as fact or as truth that are, in reality, totally meaningless. So two prime examples of this are with gender and race. We've learned to associate things like math and science careers, physical strength, anger, superheroes, sports, the police, power. We associate all of that with maleness, right? And we've come to learn to associate things like nurturing, elementary school teaching, caretaking, hysterics, cooking and cleaning, raising children, submissiveness. We've come to associate all of that with femaleness. None of this is real. None of this is true. These are just cultural and social associations that we have collectively made. And we for sure have done this regarding race, right? So many stereotypes, judgments, associations go along with skin color in our world. How smart someone is, how violent they may be, how rich or poor or where they're from, or their job, house, car, skills, capabilities, strengths, weaknesses, personality, dreams, worth. We tie all of that to race. So very many preconceived ideas and opinions about each other based on the color of skin. Even when we get to know people, individual people, even when we see statistics to the contrary of our prejudices, even when we are constantly and continuously confronted with solid evidence opposing our associations, we struggle. Okay, so to bring this back, the chasm between the knowing and the doing. There's a lot of stuff that goes into the gap between what we know and what we do. Can you see it? Right? These are just a few of them. There's more. But our past experiences, our biases, and our associations all widen the chasm between what we know and who we are in the world. What we do, how we speak, how we behave, all of the actions we do or don't take. All right, so to pivot a bit, let's also talk about how this weighs on us from an anxiety perspective. There are a handful of what I call anxiety breeding grounds. And these are places and situations and experiences where anxiety just thrives. So I teach my students about the 10 anxiety breeding grounds, and this is one of them. The chasm between what you know and what you do. Because it's hard for your brain, for your mind to make sense of it, right? There's a huge gap there, and it creates what's called cognitive dissonance, which is when what you're thinking and what you're doing aren't lining up. Like, if you know you don't want to be drinking, but then you take a drink anyway, right? You order a drink or you start drinking in the evening, whatever. You create cognitive dissonance for yourself. It's the chasm between what you know and what you do. So we talked about this today partly because it's important to be aware of, for sure, that there is a gap between what you know and what you do. That whole G.I. Joe fallacy where knowing is, in fact, not half the battle. Like, not even close. Knowing is knowing, and doing is doing. And those are actually pretty separate things. Even though it seems like the doing should easily follow the knowing, it just doesn't. But the other reason it's so important to talk about this is because most of us are feeling it. We're feeling some amount of anxiety because of this gap. Because what we're doing isn't aligned with what we know. And then we wonder why we're feeling a little miserable all the time. It's not the only breeding ground for anxiety. Anxiety comes in a lot of ways and shapes and forms, but this is a prime one. This one's pretty universal. So I thought we should talk about it, right? Talk about the hard things, talk about the real things, the places where this really gets yucky and tricky. It's the only way through it and out of it. We got to look at it, right? Be willing to see it, be willing to name it, and work through it. So this is a place worth checking in, worth considering, seeing what's what for you. Where are you in the chasm? Where are you misaligned and doing something other than what you're wanting or knowing? What are you knowing that you're not acting on? Be willing to take a look. No judgment, right? Nothing has gone wrong here. Just inquire. Be friendly, be gentle, and get curious. What's up? Anything I want to do differently here? All right, my friend. That's it for today. The chasm between knowing and doing. Such a universal and relatable place to feel anxious, right? All right, have a wonderful rest of the week. Take care of yourselves as we venture into this new season. Summer for my Northern Hemisphere people. And hey, happy winter to those of you in the Southern Hemisphere, right? I will be back next week, same time, same place for more transforming anxiety. And until then, please take care. Do you have someone to help you with your stress, anxiety, worry, and overwhelm? If not, I would love to be your coach. The Fierce Calm Project is my virtual coaching program where we get to go in on topics like this one, and I can help you apply these lessons to your life so that you're creating your own transformation. We do live coaching calls, guided meditations, on-demand yoga classes, We hold book club where we read books your neighborhood book club won't. And there's lots of bonus content that I've created just for you. When you're ready to take what you're learning on the podcast to a whole other level, then come on over and check out the Fierce Calm Project at kellyhanlonmccormick.com/Fierce Calm Project.